Natalie, I'm so excited to have you back on. I think you are now, this will be your third episode on the show.
Oh, I'm so honored. I really
Yeah.
am. I
Uh,
enjoy our conversations immensely, and it has been too long.
It has been way too long. We were talking before we just hit record that the last time we saw each other in person was the November 2019 podcast we did on gratitude, which is an incredible
Little did we
episode.
know,
Yeah, little did
little did
we
we know
know.
at that time what was about to happen.
Do you ever like ask anyone like what was the last thing you did before like you knew? Like my husband and I went to see a play starring Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker.
Mhm.
And like that was the last thing we did.
I went to a concert to see one of my favorite groups in this tiny little venue, end of February. I remember the date specifically, February 26th, flew
Yep.
back. It was like a
Yep.
few days later, it was like, oh, something is happening. Something's
Yeah.
happening. Yeah. Yeah.
And so now we're more than 2 years into this SHIT storm.
Hmm.
And we are talking before we started recording about just how like blah it's starting to feel.
Mm.
And then we also started talking about, being positive and looking on the bright side. And then a little bit about toxic positivity. So we thought, that's what we're going to talk about. Because in all transparency, guys, I did not have the topic planned because we talked about it just before.
We're just
And
winging it.
we're winging it. But
We're winging it. We're winging it.
thought that
That's
would
what
be
we've been doing. How
how
else have we done that?
exactly how precise everyone has been jumping from like one Zoom call to the next Zoom call to the next Zoom parent meeting to, then like the in-person things that we still kind of do, like wearing our mask, not wearing it under the nose kind of thing, like trying to do all the things.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I think this is a really actually important question. And it's so wonderful to have you on because you are just such an incredible resource when we think about these things, which is how do we look on the bright side? Where do we go from here, right? And
Where
where do
where
we
is the
go?
bright side, Heather? Where is it? Show me the bright side.
Yeah. I do have my behind me, I have my happy lamp. And so that's kind of the bright side to me.
Oh, it's like literally it's the bright
the
side.
the
It's
bright
the
side.
happy lamp. Oh, I
So,
know.
yeah, I feel in all honesty very sort of desperate that
Mhm.
for any kind of glimmer of hope, and find it very hard to do so, especially where we are in January of 2022. So
Mhm.
what can we do?
Mhm. Mhm. Great question. Great question. I get asked about toxic positivity more so than any other topic I've ever been asked to comment on in my role and in my work. And I'm not sure why, except that, you know, people are getting tired of being told how to feel, basically, and why is this resonating with people now? I think that's one of the reasons. I think people are exhausted and looking for rays of hope,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been dim, and that's the truth. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's time to just be honest about that. I think, and that's where the toxic part of being, positive, or this idea that you can just put a positive spin on something, on a negative situation, and make it better. Now, I'm an optimist. I'm a radical optimist. I believe that there is an upside in every situation we encounter. I really do. And I think sometimes the challenge is finding it. And so sometimes there's this intellectual aspect to optimism where it's like, this is there a practical upside? Is there something in this situation that I can take away? A lesson, growth opportunity, almost anything. And
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that there is.
Mm-hmm.
But this has been ongoing. I mean, it's like when events happen in situations that are short-lived, I think it's easier to either look back on that and say, oh, okay, well, this is what I took away from it. This is how my life is improved. If that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened. And I think we do a really good job of that. But this is different because this is never ending. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there aren't these discrete events that we can examine after the fact and say, okay, this is what I'm taking away or I'm choosing to take away.
Yeah.
And I think what this has required of us is a level of emotional endurance that I'm not sure we were fully equipped to handle.
Mm.
And I've reached my breaking point several times.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So you keep going, right? You keep going. And I think this is this idea of resilience, which is not necessarily bouncing back from, but how do you keep going?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, some of that has been scaling back.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when your mood bottoms out, when you just don't have it in you? When it's like new day, same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it requires resetting expectations. What am I realistically going to be able to do and what's most important?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's one. Maybe that thinking about, okay, look, I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. I don't know if I can do X, Y, and Z. Let me just focus on ABC.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about all I've got. And then it requires like giving ourselves some grace to say,
Yeah.
I'm just not going to get all that other stuff done. That would be great. It's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. Let me focus on these three most important things, the things that matter most, and do the best I can.
I think something just clicked when you said that. And that is that if I allow myself to focus on A, B, and C, but there's something like an employer or a job or somebody who wants you to do A through Z, it's a mismatch. And especially when the employers are really using limited resources now. And so now you're expected to go A through Z twice which makes it so frustrating. And that also then adds to that lack of empathy and inability to be kind to each other in terms of as compounded by how much just frustration and anger there tends to be. But anyways, do you how does that resonate with you when I think about the fact that sometimes what we need to do is more than what we can do?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a mismatch, right? And that gap between, expectations and reality. Here's what I'm expected for all sorts of reasons, whether that's personal and family reasons or work obligations. Here's what's expected. And here's what I'm able to do. And I think the wider the gap, the more distress we feel. We see that gap, right? I see it, right?
Yes, exactly. I was like, yes,
And every day, like not measuring up every day, right? Inadequate. And you can only tolerate that for so long before it really starts to just, break you down. And I think across the board, what we needed to do was scale back. And for a period of time, we kind of did. I mean, I think that was when things shut down and locked down, and that was really difficult and traumatic for the most part, but everything stopped.
Everyone all scaled down.
Right. Everybody did. Right. Things weren't, and then everything started to pick back up. And here we are in this, whatever, third wave. I don't know what wave we're in at this point. Nothing has stopped. Everything is now continuing at the pace that it was when it picked back up.
Right.
But we're still dealing with school cancellations and illness and working from home and juggling all of the responsibilities kind of pre-pandemic, still pandemic.
Yes, that exactly encapsulates what I jumped on feeling. Exactly. The feeling that like part of the society is still going on faster, but then other things are not. And so there is this huge mismatch. Right when the pandemic first shut down, I'm in the medical field. So I think, elective surgeries were canceled and school was canceled and all of these things, but now they're still going, but like we're all just like strapped for resources and we just feel like we cannot measure up, even if we don't want to measure up. Even if we've gotten rid of that whole, like, we have the same hours in the day as Beyonce. we've realized that's sort of useless, but yet we're expected to still fulfill so much that we can't. So we just feel
inadequate, coming up short. And I think at some point it really begins to take its toll on our health, our mental health, our emotional health, our social health. And I think about it like a supply and demand equation, right?
Yeah.
So stress, what we experience as stress, happens when what's being asked of us is more than we have to offer. It's pretty simple, right? It's like, the numerator is the obligations and the expectations and literally the things that we have to do. And the denominator is the resources that we bring to bear. So this is time, which is good, right? This is energy, effort, skill, money, as the case may be. These are all the resources that we have to be able to do the things that are expected of us.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's sometimes, that's limited. But the demands seem to be unlimited. They just keep growing and growing and growing. Yeah. And the other thing that we put on top of all of that are our expectations. The expectations of like how it needs to be done, right? So it needs to be done perfectly. It needs to be done quickly. It needs to look like this. It needs to look like that. Even when you've removed all of that, stripped that down to just the basics. This is what I have to do, and that's it. It's still too much.
Yeah.
Right. And it's always imbalanced. How we bring better resources is, well, sometimes you do need different skills. You need to learn how to do some things differently, and that helps. Sometimes you need more help. It is literally more people, more support to meet those demands. Sometimes you have to get really creative, but you can only scale back so much.
Yeah.
And bring more supply. These are limited resources.
So let's go back to 2017 when toxic positivity was something we didn't know what it was. We were just saying
positivity.
It's just positivity, right? Like
just regular positivity.
Let's transport ourselves to 2017, like now. Wouldn't that be amazing?
2017. I don't even remember 2017. I don't even know what I was doing.
Much more blonde in my hair. I'd only have one child. Anyways, okay. For fantasizing. So, it was, as we look back now, we can see a lot of this sort of toxic positivity. And you said it perfectly. We just don't want to be told how to feel, right? And that was really like everyone was just messaging each other to be like, look on the bright side and be positive and this and that. And I mean, I know the kind of answer, but like, just kind of jump off the thought process here. Like, what was the difference in our thinking 2017 versus 2022?
A lot. Actually, I would say a lot has changed in that time. And I will tell you why I think that. So I was watching the first Frozen with my girls a few weekends ago, around Thanksgiving, which was when it was first released in 2016. I hope I'm getting that right. Okay. And the song in Frozen, Let It Go, was huge at that time. Right. But that song is all about like letting go of expectations and be who you are and don't be afraid and don't suppress your emotions. Right. That was a big shift, even at that time, into allowing yourself to be who you are and feel what you feel.
Yeah.
Okay? I remember thinking back about that and how big a deal that was. And actually, we've come pretty far in allowing ourselves to feel your feelings, right? This idea that you can put a positive spin on something and just think positive and everything will be better. It's flawed. That's not true. That's not actually how it works. It's a form of denial, really. And that's what makes it toxic. Right? You're not dealing with reality. Okay. And sometimes the reality sucks.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to acknowledge that. And that actually feels better than trying to tell yourself it doesn't. Plain and simple. Okay. So we got to acknowledge, sometimes you have to, we call it embrace the suck in order to get through this. Right. Instead of trying to tell yourself that it doesn't actually suck, because you're just lying to yourself at that point. Self-denial. Or telling somebody else, cheer up. It's not so bad. It could be worse. Look on the bright side. Don't worry. Be happy. It's just dismissive. and invalidating, and which is a problem psychologically and inauthentic, and in some cases kind of harmful.
Yeah.
So at the very least, on the receiving end of that, you just feel like they don't understand or they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's how we're intending to come across when
Mm-hmm.
we're, intending to be helpful to someone we
Mm-hmm.
love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've definitely seen this shift towards less of that perfectly curated feed, right?
No, no. Yeah, you're right. I mean, no, I don't, I mean, like, no, I don't, I'm done with it. I'm over it.
I think people are, I think I even noticed that just, you know what it was for me? It was when like mom jeans came back in style. I was like, wait,
Wow.
these are in style? And it's just this idea that like, I mean, what do loose fitting pants for women mean? I mean, that's amazing in and of itself, right? Right.
Yeah,
It means that you don't have to be
yeah,
perfect. You don't have to look perfect. In fact, it's like more in fashion to just either not show off your body, right? Or and just, an acknowledgement that like we are not perfect creatures, especially after the pandemic. We're all used to being cozy, this and that, whatever. And like, yeah, we're going with it.
yeah. I love that.
And where was I going with that? I don't even know where I was going with
Permission to be imperfect,
it.
like
Permission to be
really
imperfect.
imperfect, like
Yeah.
this image and this idea that things are, you've got it figured out and your life is perfect. Like, I'm going to call bullshit on that, right? Because I
Yeah.
know, look, we've all lived through this. And I think we've seen each other in some ways, in some ways that are best. I think there was a point in time where I really think we came together, but it didn't last long. And it's really sad to see how, what I would call, socially deconditioned we've become. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of apathy, like, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not as much effort, I think, being put
Mm-hmm.
forth in
Mm-hmm.
connecting with people. And
Mm-hmm.
I hope that comes back. I mean, I hope that comes back. I do think it's going to take effort. And I read something so interesting. It just struck a chord with me. Talk about vital signs. So
Mm-hmm.
we're in healthcare, you're in the
Mm-hmm.
medical community, and you know about vital signs, right? What about a smile as a vital sign, right? As a
Mm-hmm.
sign of joy or happiness or laughter. And like, you can go a day without it. It's amazing the length of time we can go without a smile or
Mm-hmm.
seeing a smile on another person.
Ooh,
That needs to,
ouch.
like, that
Yes.
needs to stop,
Ouch.
right?
Yes.
Whether you're offering us, well, we've been masked, okay, right?
Yeah. We
Hard to
don't
see
actually
somebody
even,
smiling in a
yeah.
mask.
Yeah.
So I think offering that for yourself, right? There's some really interesting science about,
Interesting.
the messages that are being sent to our brain when we smile,
I
and also
wonder,
seeing a smile on another person.
yeah, I recently had I seen someone and I didn't recognize her at all with her mask on, which is really strange. And for like the first couple of minutes of our interaction, I wasn't totally sure it was the right person, but it was. And so like it's just all these little micro things that are happening to us under the surface that are sort of like eroding our sense of um what did we start talking about first? This just that this is this endurance. It's so much that I can't recognize someone I used to see. Isn't that crazy?
I worked with a student for an entire year. I never met her in person once until the very end of the year. We had a gathering. We were able to gather. This was 2020 into 2021, and I didn't recognize her. First of all, she was very tall, and I'd never seen her stand up, so I had no idea how tall she was. She was
Yeah.
quite tall, taller than me,
Yeah.
and
I was gonna say you're
I was like,
tall.
just, and I'm tall, so I was like, gee,
Yeah.
Matt, I'm like, wow, you're taller than me, and how would I have ever known that?
Right.
But it was so great to meet in person. There was something almost very emotional about it, because the remote work, being able to connect this way is great. It's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be an adjustment, I think, getting back together and being with people in the same place. And we're out of practice.
So where do we go with how to be positive if we are going to be careful to not be toxically positive,
Mm-hmm.
but we also need to figure out how to interact again in person, be kind to each other? Where do we find the like right mixture of like I have the same 12 hours that Beyonce does.
She has a lot more
I hate
resources though.
that
We
is
talk
like
about the resource
right.
equation. Like
That is
it's a
the
little,
like that's the one phrase.
no.
Whenever I hear toxic positivity, I think of that one. Like we all have the same 24 hours. Even 2017 me was like, no, we don't.
No.
Absolutely not. We do not.
Right.
But so where do we find this like middle ground?
I think we land on real. I think we strive for real. And I think that's how the pendulum has swung back a little bit. I think that's what you were referring to with feeds. I think it's, let's just strive for real and authentic, and meet people where they're at and lead with kindness and compassion. And that also applies to us. So it's giving ourselves some grace. It's giving others, it's not putting up with rudeness and disrespect. But I think it starts with us. I think we make conscious decisions to enter the world from a place of grace. And I think that I think we benefit from that. I think when we're putting that out into the world, we benefit from that as well. We feel better. When we're kinder to other people, we feel better. Is being kind, is that like a positivity? We can talk about positivity. So positivity isn't even a term we use in psychology. It's not like a technical term. It's like it's like this, as far as I know, it's this state of being that encompasses optimism, right? But among other things. So optimism is in there somewhere. But optimism is a term that we use in psychology. It's studied. We can operationalize it. We can measure it. And so I prefer to talk about optimism.
Got it.
Because optimism doesn't deny reality. You can be an optimistic person. And how that sounds is, it sucks right now, but it won't be like this forever. So it allows you to have hope. There's even some more action behind it, which is, okay, well, what do I need to be doing then to ensure that, it does get better? Because I believe it will. And when you believe it will, you, without realizing it sometimes, are acting in ways that are consistent with that idea. We just are. So you're thinking differently, your attitude is different, you're engaging differently. And so you're putting into effect this positive future that you imagine happening, even if right now it's a little shaky. So you can't deny the reality of a situation if you want to fix it.
Yep.
So it's hard to do when it doesn't appear that there's a clear solution or one that I have any control over. So what do I have control over? Well, how I engage with other people is something I have great control over. How they engage with me, maybe not so much. But how I choose to treat other people and engage with other people is something over which I have great control.
Yeah. And it's like a great place to like restart if you're just having difficulty being kind or giving yourself grace for a minute, which is sort of kind of this zone I actually find myself in at the moment. So, and I actually found myself, when I was at church this last weekend, it was funny. I just walked in and I noticed like this sense, it was, I don't know, it's just such a friendly place in general, but it really reminded me of what like friendship and like kindness was like. And we had traveled and been into service in a while, and then just with the health risks, sometimes you just stay home and you just watch it on the TV. And again, if you don't go to church, there's probably another example in your life of some kind of support group, or I hope, but yeah, it definitely feels like it didn't used to feel like I was transporting into another world when I went to church. Right now it does. No, it does.
And these things, I think, kind of catch you off guard a little bit. Like you have this moment of realization that it's different. And I think that there's some emotion in there. I think it's hard. I've been my emotions have been a little close to the surface. So somebody called me up the other day to just ask how I was doing. And I was like, I cried. Wow. It doesn't take much, right?
Yeah.
Just a gesture like
Yeah.
that and some conversation. And I was emotional about it. And then I kind of let myself be emotional. I like to cry. I love a good cry. I'm a big fan of crying. I do it as often as possible.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't get them out,
Therapeutic.
it's very therapeutic. It like completes the stress cycle, doesn't it? If you actually just cry. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it feels so much better.
I feel much better having this
I had to
conversation.
scale back as well.
You froze on me for a sec. Uh-oh.
I think I'm here. I'm still here. I didn't go anywhere.
Well, I want to thank you. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to us really pretty raw conversation just about sort of the state of where we are and how um, it plays into some of the topics you might be hearing about toxic positivity, the enduring fatigue of the situation that we're in, and sort of how to give yourself some grace and check out Natalie's other episode she did with me on gratefulness and gratitude. So I will link that below. But thank you so much for joining me today. Like real conversation, real raw talk, huh?
Well, thank you, Heather, because I think you and I are in positions to be, we're healthcare professionals. We're helping other people, and I think it's important for us to realize we're human, and for others to realize that we're human, and we're right there with you. We're right there with you in this, and we'll get through it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so, so much. If you guys want to learn more about where you can find Dr. Dattilo, there is tons of information in the link of the description of this show. And we'll see you again next week for a brand new episode. Bye, everyone.